WNN, zero-time Emmy Award-winning news broadcast station of the year. With anchorman Zachary Wild Turkey Gallegos and his co-host Manuel Larceny Rada.
So, a priest was working in middle of nowhere in Alaska.
Okay.
And the bishop is making his yearly visitation to check up on him.
Oh, wow.
So he's sitting there with the priest and he says, "Hey, how are you dealing with being so secluded up here in the wilderness?" And the priest says, "It's pretty tough, man. If it wasn't for my rosary and my whiskey, I'd probably go crazy. Would you care for some whiskey?" Bishop says, "Yes, of course. Rosary, bring me 2 shots of whiskey." What's that? Oh, we're live? Good evening. Welcome to Whiskey News Nation. If you've been following bourbon long enough, you remember a time when the high demand bottles of today were much easier to buy for a lot less.
They were acquired easily.
The now nearly impossible to find Blanton's original single barrel bourbon was once a frequency overlooked paperweight on store shelves before its spectacular rise in popularity, often resting in its cardboard box packaging collecting dust. Its unique compact round bottle design and $45 price tag, which was considered high at the time, is now among many lower cost options. A consumer base that had not yet caught bourbon fever may have been partly to blame for its lack of attention.
Since then, we've seen Blanton's originally single barrel bourbon rise in popularity from relatively available on just about any shelf to a bottle that sells for multiple times its asking price and a level of demand that could even be described as excessive. So what caused Blanton's surge in popularity? Well, Blanton's originally single barrel bourbon was introduced to the market in 1984. The brand was created by Elmer T. Lee, the master distiller of Albert B. Blanton's distillery at the time. Blanton's was created in honor of Colonel Albert B. Blanton as a high-end bourbon for the Japanese market. Originally, it was an export-only product serving Japan, growing appetite for upper-tier bourbons, a fact that would later help fuel bourbon popularity domestically.
Unlike other Buffalo Trace bourbons, which are aged in brick houses, Blanton's is aged in a still warehouse H. This is the only still warehouse at Buffalo Trace Distillery. Warehouse H was constructed in 1935, which was commissioned by Albert Blanton soon after Prohibition ended. Every bottle of Blanton's originated from a single barrel, and no 2 single barrels are exactly alike. Blanton's doesn't have any age statement, but it is typically known to be about 5 to 6 years old. Though limited releases can exceed this, bottle labels include the barrel dump date, which inspires collectors to find bottles for unique anniversaries and birthdays. This has an iconic bottle shape, which has a horse topper, which comes in 8 different versions, each with a horse and a jockey, and each with the letter ultimately spelling out Blanton's. So make sure if you can collect them all, you get the actual spelling of the Blanton's via the toppers.
Absolutely, absolutely. Speaking of whiskey, I like my bourbon like my relationships, on the rocks.
Oh, okay, nice.
On further news, dusty bourbons. A dusty bourbon means exactly what you would think it does, based on the literal concept of referring to anything that's old and has been sitting around collecting dust. A dusty bourbon refers to a bourbon that was bottled and released sometime in the past. Exactly how far back a bottle has to go to be considered dusty bourbon isn't specifically defined. The older the dusty, the greater its differences will be as compared to bourbon today. And the farther back you go, the more legitimate scarce bottles become.
While it may be difficult to believe based on today's market, bourbon was not always in high demand. And it was not necessarily viewed as a premium product either. It was a true definition of being every man's drink. Higher aged bourbons did not necessarily command higher desirability or price points like they do today. It was much more uncommon for producers to include much older barrels in batches that otherwise may have been only advertised as being younger or maybe with no specific age advertisement at all.
Now it's time for the whiskey weather forecast. Stay tuned. Today, on less important news, Icons of Whiskey of America's 2024 announces their winners. The American whiskey industry gathered for an evening of celebration as winners were announced in the USA regional legs of the Icons of Whiskey and World Whiskey Awards for 2024. The Icon of Whiskey, Heaven Hill Distillery, was named Distiller of the Year. Greg Metzi from Old Elk Distillery took the title of Master Distiller. Master Distiller Blender of the Year and Visitor Attraction of the Year was awarded to Buffalo Trace.
I believe that. We've been there.
I have to agree.
Fantastic
Amazing.
experience.
They do an amazing job. The event also saw the announcement of the round one category winners for the United States in the World Whiskey Awards 2024, including Best Bourbon of the Best Tennessee Whiskey, and the unveiling of two new American inductees to the Whiskey Magazine Hall of Fame, Joseph J. Magliocco from Michter's, owner, Cathinham Imports, and the Freddie Johnson from Buffalo Trace Distillery.
Awesome. I met Freddie.
Absolutely.
Super cool guy. He's iconic for Buffalo Trace Distillery. Now for the World Whiskey Awards category and winners, round one in America. Their finished bourbon, Best of Non-Kentucky, goes to
Drum roll.
Breckenridge, their port cask finish. Best of Kentucky is 15 stars, their sherry cask finish. Small batch bourbon won Best Non-Kentucky, Law's Whiskey House for their 4-grain bourbon cask strength. Best of Kentucky was Four Roses, their small batch bourbon. Single barrel bourbon, Best Non-Kentucky, Preemption, single barrel Texas straight bourbon. Best of Kentucky again goes to Four Roses single barrel bourbon. The bourbon, Best Non-Kentucky, goes to Robert Fulton straight bourbon. The Best of Kentucky is to 1792, their 12-year aged bourbon. Grain with no age statement, Bainbridge, Yama Mizunuara cask.
Can you say that again?
Bainbridge, Yama Musasasa.
Ah, I like it.
And of course, the wheat goes to 12 years and under. Lone Elm, their single barrel.
Shit.
Bless you.
Thank you. On World Whiskey Awards 2024 World's Best Round number 2, America Style Whiskey, sponsored by Brindiamo Group. Few American Straight Whiskeys, Tennessee Whiskey, Uncle Nearest, 1856. Fantastic. Premium aged whiskey. Finished bourbon, Breckenridge, port cast out of Breckenridge, Colorado. All right. Small batch bourbon, Law's Whiskey House, 4-grain bourbon, cask strength. Single barrel bourbon, Four Roses. That's 3 roses for 4 roses so far. Bourbon sponsored by Kentucky Bourbon Festival, the 1792 12-year-old. Yes, and that is the end of the 2024 awards.
Awesome. Well, we appreciate you guys watching. Please hit that like, that subscribe, and as always, catch you on
The Back Nine.
Now, for our meme of the week.